And now, here to discuss the developments in the U.S. presidential elections and the European Commission as the top jobs are still being doled out is Jakub Janda, director at the European Values Center for Security Policy. Hello, and thank you very much for joining me this night on World Talks.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, now we're going to, we'll speculate a little bit on the what's going on in the United States. So rumor has it that Joe Biden could, as early as this weekend, drop out of the race. He's had increased pressure from top Democrats that he is just not going to win this election and probably needs to drop out of the race. This late in the game makes it very difficult for Democrats, or it makes it very easy, depending on which way you look at it. But to start off, do you think the Democrats are right, and you think that he'll face more pressure as he's looking unlikely to beat Donald Trump, so therefore he should fall out of the race?
I think definitely yes. It's coming to be very hard for President Biden to get reelected. Many of the factors are going against him, and that's why I think it's high time that the Democratic Party actually came up with a possible replacement, whether it's the current vice president or somebody else. But it's something what is very worrying for us sitting here in Central Europe, because the stability or the expectation is actually getting lost, I would say. So because it's very important for the security and defense of Central Europe to see who will be the next US president. And this uncertainty actually means that we definitely need to work with both options, whether it would be possible President Trump or the Democratic winner as well. So that makes it quite harder for our region.
Certainly. Now, concerning Vice President right now, Vice President Kamala Harris, do you think that she has room to be the top runner? Polling doesn't favor her very well. She doesn't have a very high approval rating. Do you think the Democrats need to focus on some other new generation candidates, if you will?
It's a tough choice, because if Kamala Harris, the current vice president, would be good enough, she would have already been the candidate, because that was the previous expectation, from my understanding, that she was supposed to be the candidate for the president this year after those 3-4 years in the vice presidential office. But she was seen as a political failure by the Democratic Party, and that's why she was not chosen to be the leading candidate, despite the publicly known status of President Biden and about his age. So I'm afraid that it's quite late in the game for the Democratic Party, and they are really in a crisis mode at this moment.
Right. Now, in terms of security and bilateral relations with all the countries in our region, Central and Eastern Europe, right now it seems like many people are fearing that Donald Trump may come back. But who would be better for our region, Democrats or Republicans at this stage?
It really depends who you ask, but possible President Biden or Vice President Harris as the winner would actually mean some continuity of the current policies, I would say, which we are seeing, which are relatively stable. But if you look to support of Ukraine, it's pretty weak. We have seen quite appeasement policies led by the Biden administration, which do not allow Ukraine to really fight back very hard as they could and should against the Russian invasion. A possible win of President Trump would mean a lot of uncertainty. It would likely mean high pressure by his administration on Ukraine to quickly give up some of its territories and strike a ceasefire deal with Russia, which I'm afraid the likelihood that Russia would follow any agreement which could be done is quite low. So that's something that would bring a lot of uncertainty for our region, given that our main focus is and should be the defense of Ukraine.
It's interesting that you say that, because Republicans tout that as one of President Trump's, former President Trump's qualities, is his unpredictability, and therefore they think that that could be very effective in dealing with Vladimir Putin. We did hear during the debate that that President Trump said that he wanted the two parties, of course, Ukraine, Russia, to sit at the table, and if they can't negotiate in good faith, then he could potentially take the side of Ukraine. Knowing Vladimir Putin, That sounds pretty good at this point. And we have to remember that this is an election year, and so the political rhetoric might not exactly match the actions once the election is complete. Your thoughts?
Yeah. In this region, we can hope that if President Trump wins, that he would actually put his weight, a political weight, a security weight behind Ukraine, to force Russia to sign a ceasefire which would be acceptable to Ukraine. But I'm afraid Russia does not have many incentives to really go for any deal which would not be so favorable to Russian imperial demands. Because Russia has the time, given the huge amounts of material support of China for the Russian war and Russian war crimes. That's actually where Russia can play for time. And I'm afraid that's why Ukraine is in a very disadvantageous position. So putting pressure on Ukraine by a possible US administration, I think will be strategically a bad idea. It will not help Ukraine defenses. So that's why many people in Ukraine are scared of this option. But we cannot do anything about it. We just need to wait how the U.S. electorate decides about their new president, and we can only increase our defense spending, increase our support for Ukraine, which many countries are doing. But for example, Germany is not. Germany, for example, just decided that they will, let's say, cut half of their support for Ukraine next year, which I think is strategically very stupid.
Well, that's also it's a good talking point. What happens with Germany? We know Trump's former position on Germany. He was very critical of Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2. He was very supportive of Poland, talking about the economics of things. If we look at Germany right now, they're taking just as much LNG from Russia as they are from the United States. So maybe, what are your expectations for Trump? Should he return to the White House, how will he deal, do you think, with Germany?
I think Germany will be pretty much a scapegoat for a possible Trump administration in Europe. In some ways, objectively, that it makes sense, because German-China policy is the weakest one in Europe and is actually a disaster for Europe, but also for European security and transatlantic security. So I think President Trump would push Germany very hard over their China policy for good reasons, and he would be right in this case. On the other hand, Germany has really stepped out some of their defense spending. They are all about 2% at least already, which is quite good, even though not enough. And Germany has been paying a lot in support or assistance packages to Ukraine, which is good. But if Germany really goes forward as they just decided, by cutting half of the support for Ukraine next year, that's where I think that would be very bad for Ukraine itself, but also for kind of NATO cohesion as well, which we are trying to build and keep, but Germany is not very helping in this case.
Right. It seems to be really bad signaling at this point in time, with Germany coming out and saying that. Some say it's simply an accounting issue within the German federal budget, and that it is bad messaging, but actually the money will somehow find its way there. Could it be possible that the Germans are hedging their bets and just trying to make sure that if indeed Trump comes back into power, then they'll have a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to negotiations?
That's possible. I hope they are right if they are hedging like this. But what we need to think about is the big picture. And the big picture is that Russia is waging a huge war in Europe. Russia is partly winning in that war. And Ukraine needs stability, stable support, and our own best will. That's what the big picture is. And decisions like this one, like cutting half of German aid to Ukraine for next year, is really what doesn't help. It hurts Ukrainian will, Ukrainian motivation as well, because what the servicemen, or what men and women of Ukraine who are dying in the front line because of the Russian attack, what they are seeing decreasing political and financial support from some of Western countries, and in this case is Germany, which I think is the bad decision in this case.
Yes, indeed. Well, Jakub Janda, Director for the European Values Center and Security Policy, I appreciate your thoughts on this issue. Thank you for sharing them with our viewers. And next time, hopefully, we'll get to the European commissioners, as that's actually a separate talk. Thank you, sir, for joining us.